The President also discussed the urgent need for the Senate to confirm his slate of eminently qualified nominees, in spite of Democratic obstruction, so that they can get to work on behalf of the American people. The President will continue to work closely with the Senate to deliver on a legislative agenda that puts the interests of the American people first. This morning, the President welcomed winners of the Minority Enterprise Development Week Awards. This awards program is designed to celebrate the outstanding achievements of minority entrepreneurs, as well as individuals and organizations that are leading the way in advancing minority business enterprise. The award winners who visited the White House certainly meet that criteria, and the President was proud to host them. He's laser focused on building an economy that works for all Americans and delivering tax cuts and reforms for these hardworking entrepreneurs by the end of the year. On the national security and foreign policy front, for the 8th time, Russia has blocked UN Security Council action to hold accountable those who use chemical weapons, including terrorists in the Assad regime. By blocking the extension of the joint investigative mechanism, Russia has once again demonstrated it does not care about stopping the barbaric use of chemical weapons in the world and will do whatever it takes to protect its ally, the Assad regime. Blocking the extension of the investigating authority means nothing less than Russia's endorsement of the Assad regime's use of chemical weapons against innocent women and children. We will continue to push back against this. And with that, I'll take your question. Alex.
President Trump has previously tweeted that Jeff Flake is a very weak and ineffective senator. Do you know if he has any reaction to Flake announcing that he won't seek re-election?
I haven't spoken with him directly since the announcement by Senator Flake, but I think that based on previous statements and certainly based on the lack of support that he has from the people of Arizona, it's probably a good move. Matthew.
Thanks, Sarah. So we have 2 Republican senators now just today, Senators Corker and Flake, calling the president's behavior unacceptable and dangerous, saying that he regularly tells untruths. Senator Flake just called on his fellow Republicans to end what he called complicity and accommodation. I'm wondering what's the White House's response to this criticism coming from 2 Republican senators?
I think that we support the American people on this one. I think that the people both in Tennessee and Arizona supported this president, and I don't think that the numbers are in the favor of either of those 2 senators in their states, and so I think that this is probably the right decision.
Thank you, Sarah.
John,
today you earlier...
Sarah, why is the president involved in this feud with Senator Corker? Is there some concern on Capitol Hill that what you should be focused on is getting your agenda of tax reform through, and that petty feuds like this just distract from the bigger issues? So why is the president engaging in this?
Look, the president is focused on doing this. That's what he spent the majority of his day talking about. He went to the Hill and met with Republican senators to talk about tax reform, to push his legislative agenda. That's what he's spending a good bit of this week doing, and will continue doing next week until we get the job done.
But why does he engage like this?
Look, you've got an individual in the president. He's a fighter. We've said it many times before. The people of this country didn't elect somebody to be weak. They elected somebody to be strong. And when he gets hit, he's going to hit back. And I think Senator Corker knows that. And he's, maybe trying to get a headline or 2 on his way out the door. John Decker.
Thanks a lot, Sarah. Since the president's taken off in office, as you know, 2 Republican senators, Senator Corker of Tennessee and Senator Flake of Arizona, have both announced they're not running for re-election. In your view, is the president remaking the Republican Party? And if he's doing that, is he remaking it in a positive way?
I wouldn't say necessarily he's remaking it because you have a couple of individuals that are no longer running for office. Look, he's got a great relationship with a number of Republican senators. He's going to continue working with them and make sure that we get things done for the American people. He wants people to be in the Senate that are committed to actually moving the ball down the field, and I don't think these 2 individuals necessarily have been as focused on that. The president wants to get things done, and that's what we're going to work through the fall.
So I understand that neither of these 2 senators we're talking about now have been allies, to say the least, of the president. But this has been an extraordinary series of attacks on the president from major figures in the Republican Party, and not typical political attacks. I mean, saying that the president is responsible for the debasement of the nation, that a breakdown of civility is the fault of the president's, and that enough is enough. We've seen similar remarks from John McCain, the party's former nominee. In any of this, does any of this make the president pause and wonder if he is doing anything wrong, if he bears any responsibility
Look,
for
again,
what these senators are saying is a breakdown of civility in our country?
Look, I think the voters of these individual senator states are speaking in pretty loud volumes. I think that they were not likely to be reelected, and I think that shows that the support is more behind this president than it is those two individuals.
Why is there so little?
See,
Why is there so little pushback from other Republican senators on this? I mean, Mitch McConnell is the Republican leader. Bob Corker is still a committee chairman. Should there
Look,
be?
Leader McConnell stood with the president just last week here at the White House and talked about how they were working together, how they were getting things done, how they were focused on actually moving the agenda forward. And so I think that's a pretty clear indication of where his support lies and what we're working to do.
If I could just pick up on what John was talking about. One of the criticisms from Senator Corker today was the idea that history will most remember President Trump for debasing the country. And you could hear in Senator Flake's remarks the idea that he seemed to be writing it for history. How do you think history will view not only the remarks of the two senators today, but also former President Bush last week?
I certainly think history is going to look at this president as somebody who helped defeat ISIS, who built an economy that was stronger than it's been in several decades, who brought unemployment to a 16-year low, who's created over 1.7 million jobs since being elected. I think those are the things that people actually care about, not some petty comments from Senator Corker and Senator Flake. And I think they're a lot more concerned about the big policy initiatives that this president is driving, including historic tax cuts, which we're going to get done by the end of this year, and then start focusing on some other things. Those are the things this president will be remembered by, and I think those are pretty good, certainly good facts and ones that we're happy to stand on. Peter?
Thank you, Sarah. The president at lunch today asked the senators for their a show of hands on two candidates for Fed chair, Jerome Powell and John Taylor. Does this mean that Powell and Taylor are the president's favorites for the Fed chairmanship? And why would he ask input from the Senate on this?
Those are certainly individuals that he's looking at, and as we've said, we don't have any announcements on that at this time, but the president is taking that decision extremely seriously, and he's being very thorough in the process, and he'll have an announcement on it soon.
Sarah, are you concerned? Is the White House concerned at all that these conflicts, which keep escalating, could impact the president's agenda? I mean, specifically, could, for example, Senator Corker, if the president continues to, lash out at him like this, could that prompt him to, do things that could be detrimental to the tax code?
I would hope that Senator Corker is more focused on getting things done in his final months. And so we hope that he'll be very supportive of the tax cuts and tax reforms that the people in his state have demanded and, frankly, elected him to go to Congress and help to elect.
So I pick up on that because the president in two different tweets today had said that Senator Corker was fighting tax cuts. Those were his words. Will now fight tax cuts and is now fighting tax cuts. But there's been nothing public from Senator Corker that he might be against tax cuts. So what exactly was the president suggesting or referring to there in those tweets? Has Senator Corker privately told the president or the White House that he's against tax cuts?
I don't know that he said he's against them, but he certainly indicated his unwillingness at this point to really step forward and work with the administration on getting things done. We hope that he will come around and certainly vote for tax cuts, as the people in his state have demanded and requested and pushed for him to do such.
Does the White House think that Flake, McCain, and Corker will eventually vote for tax cuts, all three of them, because you need all three of them?
I certainly think America hopes they do. Francesca.
Sarah, last week I asked you if the president wanted Senator Corker to resign, and you didn't want to go there. In light of everything that has happened since, has the White House changed its position on that? And at the very least, does the president think that Senator Corker should step down as head of the Foreign Relations Committee, especially since Senator Corker told CNN today, and I quote, that he wants to investigate some of the things that he is purposely breaking down, he being President Trump?
Look, I think that's a decision for Leader McConnell in terms of who has those chairmanships. That's not something for the president to determine.
The president doesn't think that he should step down or that he should resign?
I haven't spoken to him specifically about that, but in terms of how the chairmanships are decided, that would be up to Leader McConnell. John?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Two questions. There is currently a contested primary for Senator Corker's seat. Congresswoman Blackburn facing former Congressman Fincher, and it's almost inevitable there will be a contested primary in Arizona. Dr. Ward not going to be left to get the nomination. Will the president take any role in the nomination process there?
As I've said many times before from the podium, I'm not going to weigh into any political races and whether or not the president will engage. It's not appropriate for me to do from here. Charlie?
The other thing, Sarah, is that in his penultimate salvo on Twitter, the president said that Senator Corker asked him to be Secretary of State and he refused the request. That's a pretty serious claim because no one really has been proven to have asked for a job in modern times like that. Did Senator Corker actually ask the president to be his Secretary of State?
That's my understanding, but I don't know much beyond those initial comments. Charlie?
Is the president confident that Majority Leader Mitch McConnell can hold the Senate caucus together?
Yes, he is, and he thinks that we're going to work together with Republican senators, particularly Leader McConnell, to get tax cuts and tax reform done this year.
And is he upset by senators?
Why does the White House and the president specifically continue to say that Senator Bob Corker helped President Obama on the Iran deal when the facts clearly say that's not true?
Actually, the facts do say that it's true. It was Senator Corker who wrote the INARA legislation that legitimized the Iran nuclear deal. Despite lacking the votes to ratify the flawed Iran deal as a treaty in the Senate, Corker's bill rolled out the red carpet for the Obama administration, gaining congressional approval without the necessary votes. He may not have voted for it, but he certainly helped make it happen.
But he didn't vote for it.
But
I
he
mean, the
helped
Washington
allow
Post
it
has
to
given
take
4
place.
Pinocchios on this. If you look through
And
it,
as I've said
Senator
many
Corker
times
says it's a
before, I
lie.
wouldn't
Why
use
did-
the Washington Post as my source, Jeff. You
Exactly,
should know
but
better
this
than
is
that.
true. When you go back and look through
Jeff
this, the
Mason.
White House clearly is not telling the truth on this. Why does the
Actually-
president continue to say that he helped President Obama with it? It's
Because
just not
he
true.
did.
He voted against it, though, Sarah.
He voted against it, but he allowed it to happen. He put it in motion. He rolled out the red carpet, and he made it possible for it to move forward. That is a fact, and that is true. Jeff?
Sarah, what do President Trump's advisors advise him about his use of Twitter? And on a separate, unrelated issue, is the president seeking to kill a deal between Boeing, or Boeing's a deal to sell planes to Iran Air?
On the first one, I would say in regards to Twitter, as I've stated several times before from here, it's always a benefit for the president to be able to speak directly to the American people without any filter, without any bias. I think that's a positive thing. I think it's one of the reasons that the president is because he often goes directly to the American people, speaks directly to them, and I think that's a plus. And the second question, I'm not aware of that, any detailed conversations. I couldn't weigh into that right now.
Sarah, on Niger, and I'm not going to ask you to talk about the ongoing investigation, but I do want to say the commander of U.S. forces in Africa told Congress last March that he had only a quarter of the reconnaissance flights needed to do his job, and in fact, that did impact search and rescue missions. Is the White House concerned that U.S. forces in Africa do not have adequate resources and that could have contributed to what happened in Niger? And has there been any outreach by the White House to Nigerian officials?
As always, the safety and security of our military is a top priority. In terms of specifics, we're going to wait until that investigation is completed. As General Dunford said yesterday, we're going to make sure that we get full and adequate answers for not just the American people, but for the families of those that were lost. And we're going to continue to do that. The administration fully supports the Department of Defense in that process.
Has there been outreach from the White House to Niger?
I'm not sure. I'd have to check and circle back. April?
Sarah, back on Niger, and I'll shoot. The widow of Sergeant Latavia Johnson is concerned that there may not be remains in his coffin. What does this White House say as she is not able to get anything more than dog tags as it relates to trying to put to rest all of this?
My understanding is that the family can request to see those remains, and that would be a process handled through the Department of Defense and the casualty officer, and I would refer you to the Department of Defense for specific